Sometimes when modern life gets to be too much, you just need to dream of a life in a simpler, more peaceful time. A time and place when people knew how to treat each other, like the United States in the 1950s. This is a review of the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode Far Beyond the Stars. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know which 1950s sci fi writers the characters of DS9 would be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. The theme of this batch of reviews is woke episodes, and though this is not the last episode of the batch, no series of Star Trek episode reviews with this theme would be complete without this episode, because this is the episode when, after decades of allegory and metaphor, the writers of Star Trek dropped all pretense, grabbed the audience by the shoulders, and yelled, "Racism is bad, you fucking dipshits!" right in their faces. As our story begins, Captain Sisko is having a bad day. He and Major Kira are talking about the recent loss of the starship Cortez, which was commanded by an old friend of Sisko. The war with the Dominion is dragging on with no end in sight, and Sisko is getting a little sick of it. As Kira leaves, Joseph, Sisko's father, steps into the office. He's here on his first trip away from Earth to see the station, and most importantly, to spend some time with his son and grandson. Joseph's like, "How's it going, son?" And Sisko says, "Not great. This sucks. Thinking about quitting." Joseph says, "Well, that's your decision. If you decide to give up and turn your back on everything you fought for and everything your friends have died for up to this point and run away like a sniveling little chicken shit, I'll support you 100%. Sisko notices someone walk by the door of his office. Someone who looks very out of place on the space station. Someone dressed in a suit and tie. Sisko walks out of the office and looks around ops, but the man in the suit is gone. He's like, "Did anybody see that guy who was here just now? The one who looked like Clayton Endicott III?" But nobody around seems to have noticed him. How odd. Later, Sisko and Cassidy are walking down a corridor when Sisko sees a guy in a 20th century baseball uniform approaching. The guy sounds a little like Worf, if Worf was ever happy about something for 3 seconds of his life. The baseball player goes through a door, and Sisko turns to Cassidy like, "Who is that?" Cassidy says, "Who is who? I didn't see anybody. Haven't you figured out how this works yet?" Sisko follows the baseball player through the door and suddenly finds himself standing in the middle of the street in a 20th century American city. Let's say New York. It's always San Francisco in Star Trek. It's about time something is New York. Sisko is understandably confused. He gets hit by a cab, yep, definitely New York, and as a crowd begins to gather around him, Sisko wakes up back on Deep Space Nine, in the infirmary, and Dr. Bashir is there, and so is Jake, and so are Joseph and Cassidy. Bashir explains that the visions Sisko saw were similar to the ones he had a year ago in the episode Rapture, when he became obsessed with an ancient Bajaran city and experienced visions from the prophets so powerful they nearly killed him. Bashir wants Sisko to stay in the infirmary for observation. Sisko's like, "Oh, really? I was just about to quit my job." Bashir says, "Well, this is serious. Look at these readings." He hands Sisko a pad, but when Sisko looks at it, he's suddenly back in New York. And the pad is a copy of Galaxy magazine. And this time, Sisko isn't dressed in his Starfleet uniform. He's dressed in a suit and tie, and he's arguing with the nog-looking guy at the newsstand about the relative merits of science fiction and war stories. Then Sisko's buddy, Albert, who looks a little like Chief O'Brien if you kinda squint and tilt your head to the side, walks up like, "Hey, Benny." And Sisko, who is apparently Benny now, and who seems right at home in these surroundings, greets his friend, and they walk off up the sidewalk together. Back from the credits, and we're at the office of Incredible Tales, a pulp sci-fi magazine, and it's New York, and it's sometime in the 1950s, and the gang's all here. There's Julius and Kay, who look like Bashir and Kira. There's Herbert, who looks like Quark with all the shit taken off his face. There's Darlene, the Daffy and Daxy secretary. There's Paps, the boss, who looks like Odo if he did a more convincing Rene Aubergenois. And there's Roy, the artist, who's like General Martok if he had chosen to study the brush rather than the blade and also had all the shit taken off of his face. And of course, there's Benny and Albert. After Herbert and Pabst bicker over the freshness of the office donuts, Pabst hands out the writing assignments for the next issue. Roy shows off a series of drawings he's made, and the various writers choose a drawing and write a story to go along with it. One drawing in particular, this one of a familiar-looking space station, catches Benny's eye. He claims that one. Then Pabst announces that a photographer will be coming in one of these days to take pictures of the writing staff to run in the next issue. Everyone except Kay and Benny, because God forbid the readers find out that she's a woman or that he is black. Benny makes a soft-spoken protest, reminding Pabst that there are many known successful black writers: W.E.B. Du Bois, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright. Pabst is like, yeah, but they write for smart people. We write for science fiction fans. Our audience isn't going to pay for stories written by black people. I'm sorry, Benny. I wish things were different, but not enough to try and change them. That's my character. On his way home, the wind blows the drawing of the space station out of Benny's hand, which leads to a delightful encounter with two of New York's finest, a pair of detectives who bear resemblances to Gul Dukat and Wei Yun. They step on Benny's drawing and refuse to let him take it because they don't know if it's even his. Benny explains that he works at the magazine. The drawing is his. It's a drawing of a space station, and it's worthless to anyone other than him. And finally, the cops relent and let him have it. But the Ducat cop warns Benny, "You're getting off easy this time. Next time, not so lucky." See, that's what we need more of in today's world, some law and order. Otherwise, we're going to have black people running around picking up the drawings they just dropped all over the place. Is that the country you want? Back in his own neighborhood, Benny passes a street preacher who looks like Cisco's father. The preacher is like, "Praise the Lord, praise the word of the prophets. Write the words, Brother Benny. Write the words so that people may see the glory that lies ahead." Benny's like, "A little weird that you know my name, but okay." And Benny goes home to his apartment, sits down at his typewriter, and starts his story. He looks up at the window and, for a moment, sees a reflection of Captain Sisko looking back at him. Benny shakes it off and keeps typing. That happens to me, too. The reflection thing? Only with me, I don't see Captain Sisko. I see this guy in a denim jacket with long, stringy gray hair and a vicious, malevolent smile just kind of staring through me with palpably evil intensity. I guess that probably happens to everybody, though. Benny stops by a coffee shop with his finished story and excitedly tells his girlfriend, Cassie, the waitress who looks like Cassidy Yates, all about it. She's happy for him, but she'd be happier if he got on board with her plan to buy this coffee shop so they might have a more reliable source of income for their future than his writing. Willie, the Warfish baseball player Sisko saw on the station earlier, walks in and he is immediately the center of attention. Everybody loves Willie. But Willie only seems interested in Cassie. She waves off his flirtations. Benny, her boyfriend, is sitting right there, which Willie don't care because Willie is a fucking boss. But Cassie cares because she, I don't know, loves Benny or something. Whatever. Cassie asks Willie how come he still lives here in Harlem when he's rich and famous enough that he can live wherever he wants. Willie scoffs at the suggestion. They can barely get used to me playing alongside them. Living next to them? Forget about it. Besides, here people admire me. There, I'm just another black guy who can hit a curveball. Willie excuses himself to go flirt with a table of girls on the other side of the diner. Then Jimmy, the 1950s street hustler version of Jake, comes in. Benny tells Jimmy he needs to straighten himself out or he's going to find himself in a lot of trouble. Jimmy's like, anything I can get into, I can get out of. I think Jimmy's going to be just fine. Benny tells Jimmy about his new story, tells him that instead of writing science fiction about white people, he's writing about their people, black people. Jimmy is skeptical, but says he might check out next month's issue of Incredible Tales if he can scrape together the money. Back at the office, Benny shows his story, which he has titled, what else, Deep Space Nine, to his fellow writers, and they all love it. Everyone is excited and happy for Benny, except for Pabst, that is. It's a good story, Benny, but you know I can't print it. You made the hero a black guy. People won't accept that. I'm not a social crusader. I'm just trying to put out a magazine. If we publish a story with a black man in command of a space station, it could cause a race riot. Herbert says that's just an attempt to rationalize your personal cowardice. And Pabst says, fuck off, commie. And Herbert's like, what's that supposed to mean? Are you calling me a commie, you fascist? Things settle down, but Pabst doesn't move from his decision. If Benny wants his story printed, he needs to make the captain a white man. Benny commiserates with Cassie and Jimmy at the coffee shop. Jimmy's like, I told you so. Cassie's like, what about quitting writing and buying this place with me? Benny's reluctant to do that. He's a writer, and that's what he wants to be. On the way home, he has another encounter with the preacher, who reminds him to write the words, to show people the path out of darkness. Benny's like, I'm working on it, okay? Benny goes home and writes another Captain Sisko story. Cassie comes over for a planned date, and she's like, why are you writing another one when you didn't sell the first one? Benny's like, I don't know, I'm strangely compelled by forces I don't understand? Something like that? Hey, let's dance. Benny and Cassie dance, but as they do, their environment shifts, and suddenly they're Sisko and Cassidy dancing in Sisko's quarters. Then they're Benny and Cassie again. Benny loses his balance and tells Cassie that he's starting to see things from his story, and he feels like he's becoming his Captain Sisko character. Sometime later, Benny returns to the office and presents 6 more unwanted Captain Sisko stories to Pabst, who is utterly baffled by this. I already told you I can't print this. Albert speaks up with a suggestion. Why not make the ending of the first story a dream? Captain Sisko's not a real person in the story. He's the dream of an ordinary black person who's hoping for a better future. Herbert doesn't like it because it guts the story, but Pabst seems open to it, and Benny thinks that getting a compromised version of his story printed is better than not getting it printed at all, so he agrees. Benny is excited. He tells Jimmy the good news, but Jimmy seems preoccupied by some big business he's involved with. He tells Cassie, who shares his excitement and agrees to go out tonight to celebrate. The celebration doesn't go super well, though. They have another unsettling encounter with the preacher, then gunshots ring out on the street, and Benny runs to see what's happened. Jimmy has been killed, and the 2 cops who hassled Benny earlier are standing nearby, obviously responsible. They say they shot Jimmy attempting to break into a car. The cops try to move Benny away, but he resists, so one of them hits Benny with a blackjack, knocking him to the ground, and they beat him savagely, momentarily transforming from cops to Ducat and Weyoun as they do. It's several weeks later. Benny is still not fully recovered from the beating he got from the cops, but he's well enough to go into the office, because today is the day the new issue arrives, and he wants to see his Captain Sisko story in print. He arrives to some good news. His pal Albert has sold a novel about robots. Benny is happy for his friend. Then Pabst comes in with the bad news. There will be no magazine this month. Mr. Stone, the publisher, has ordered the entire run pulped. It's because of my story, isn't it? Benny demands to know. He didn't want to publish my story because the hero is a black man. Pabst starts to get angry. Hey, look, this magazine belongs to Mr. Stone, and if he doesn't want to publish this month, we don't publish this month. That's it. This isn't about what's right. It's about what is. And while I'm on that subject, Benny, Mr. Stone also says that you're fired. That's the last straw for Benny. He tells Pabst, you can't fire me because I quit. To hell with you, and to hell with Stone, to hell with all of this shit. Julius tells him to stay calm, and Benny says, calm never got me a damn thing. Go ahead and call the cops if you want. They can't hurt me. None of you can, not anymore. I'm a human being, damn it. You can deny it all you want, but Ben Sisko, that space station, those people, they exist. I created them. They're here in my mind. You can pulp a story, but you can't pulp an idea. That future is real. I created it, and it's real. Benny collapses, sobbing, and we cut to him being loaded into an ambulance. Inside the ambulance with him is the preacher. Benny is dressed in Sisko's Starfleet uniform. The preacher says, rest well, you have walked the path of the prophets. Benny looks at the preacher and says, please tell me, who am I? The preacher says, don't you know? You are the dreamer and the dream. Benny looks out the window, and instead of the New York City street outside, he sees stars streaking by in the blackness of outer space. Sisko wakes up in the infirmary on Deep Space Nine once again. Though he experienced several weeks in the life of Benny Russell, Bashir tells him he was only out for a few minutes, and his brain patterns have returned to normal now. Bashir can't explain it, but everything seems fine. Later, Joseph drops by Sisko's quarters to check in on him. Sisko says he's feeling okay, and he's decided not to quit. He's going to stay and finish the job he started, and if he fails, Joseph picks it up from there. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Sisko says, since when do you quote from the Bible? Joseph's like, shit, that was from the Bible? I thought I made that up. Anyway, it sounds like that dream you had helped you to figure a few things out. Yes, Sisko says, though I have begun to wonder, what if it wasn't a dream? Maybe Benny Russell isn't the dream, we are. Maybe we're figments of his imagination. Maybe somewhere out there, far beyond all those stars, Benny Russell is dreaming of us. Sisko approaches the window and sees the reflection of Benny looking back at him. The end. So, yeah, just a light, frivolous episode with nothing too important to say. It's good to have one of those every now and then. This is one of the best episodes Deep Space Nine ever produced. One of the best episodes any Star Trek show ever produced. And as fearless and unambiguous a statement in favor of equality and human dignity as you would ever have seen on TV at the time, or would see on TV now. This episode is what happens when the creators of Deep Space Nine decide to stop fucking around and remind the audience what the show is actually about. And yet, despite dealing with a serious subject in a serious way, the episode also finds space for humor and presents it in a way that doesn't undercut the drama or the message. The main source of fun in the episode comes from seeing the regular actors play different characters. This is a reliably solid gag whenever Star Trek does it. It's always a good time when the ensemble gets to stretch its legs and do something a little different. There's an added layer this time with the Deep Space Nine crew being reimagined as stand-ins for assorted 1950s science fiction writers. There's Chief O'Brien as the robot-obsessed Asimov equivalent. There's Bashir and Kira as Julius and Kay. Kay publishes under her initials as K.C. Hunter to hide her gender, a trick many women used in order to have writing careers despite the prevailing sexism of the 20th century, which of course immediately brings to mind legendary Star Trek writer Dorothy D.C. Fontana, but Julius and Kay are also probably meant to represent the real-life husband and wife writing team of Henry Kuttner and Catherine C.L. Moore. There's Quark as Herbert, who is a less hot-headed but still righteously indignant analog of Harlan Ellison. And of course, Herbert's nemesis is Odo's doppelganger, Pabst, who isn't based on any specific person that I'm aware of, but represents the white moderate, who is aware of social injustice and theoretically would like to see things improve, but isn't willing to threaten the status quo to actually try to change anything. I love that Quark and Odo are adversaries in seemingly any universe. And I also love that this time their roles are reversed, with Odo's character in the position of the bad guy, the obstacle to progress, while Quark is playing the conscience of the office, advocating for the rights of his fellow writers and standing up for racial equality alongside Benny. Stepping outside the magazine office, how great is Worf as Willie the baseball player? I'm sure Michael Dorn appreciated getting to work most of this episode out of the Worf makeup, and though he's only in a couple of scenes and is peripheral to the plot, he makes a memorable impression. Dorn's performance foregrounds the brashness and bravado of Willie, but also lets us see beneath the surface to glimpse Willie's awareness of his place in this racist world. Even he, a superstar athlete, isn't comfortable spending too much time outside his majority black home neighborhood. The other regulars aren't playing characters inspired by real people, but they still get their moments to shine. Dax in the role of Darlene, the secretary from the New Yorkiest part of New York, judging by her accent. Martok as the artist, who attributes one of his more bizarre illustrations to having had too much sauerkraut the night he drew it. Nog as the newspaper vendor, who disapproves of science fiction and loves war stories. Nice bit of foreshadowing for Nog there, though I'm not sure it was intentional. Jake as the cynical, delightfully sleazy, and sadly doomed Jimmy. Joseph Sisko as the preacher. What else are you going to do with Brock Peters and that incredible voice? And Dukat and Wei Yun in the roles of the two racist cops. Okay, so they're not all so fun. The most important character is Benny Russell, Captain Sisko's alternate self. Benny isn't based specifically on a real writer, but he is reminiscent of a few. In interviews, Avery Brooks has cited Octavia Butler and Samuel Delaney as inspirations for the character. More generally, as is the case with the character of Pabst, Benny Russell represents a type. A writer who was forced to hide his racial identity in order to get published, because white publishers didn't print the work of black writers. There was a robust subculture of works by black writers published specifically for black audiences, and that is referred to in the episode, but for writers like Benny, who wanted their work to be read outside of their own community, concealing their blackness was usually a necessity. This is all stuff that actually happened. The names have been changed, but it's all representative of the reality that black Americans and black writers specifically lived with. I've noted that some of the other episodes I've reviewed in this batch, particularly the episode I reviewed previous to this one, Rejoined, played around with the conventions of social issue sci-fi stories. Far Beyond the Stars turns those conventions upside down. Instead of doing what socially conscious sci-fi stories usually do, and using the sci-fi concepts to create an allegory for the social issue being addressed, Far Beyond the Stars uses its sci-fi elements to transport its hero through time and space in order to drop him right down in the middle of the actual, literal problem the episode is about. Captain Sisko doesn't have to contend with a situation that approximates racism. He finds himself facing racism, undisguised, exactly as real people have had to face it in real life. Not very subtle, but like I said before, this episode is where the creators of the show tell you what the show is about, just in case anyone in the audience missed the memo. There's more real life packed into this episode than in any other episode of Star Trek I can think of. Not only is the discrimination and violence experienced by Benny Russell a dramatization of something very real, the experience of Benny as a black writer trying to get a story about a black protagonist published is similar to what Avery Brooks himself experienced as the first black actor to be cast as the lead of a Star Trek series. That's why he's not only the perfect actor to lead this episode, he's also the perfect choice to direct it. He knows what this is all about firsthand. And just in case, framing the entire series as the creation of a black writer, imagining a brighter future that includes a black man in command of a space station isn't enough to get the point across to you, we've got Dukat and Wei Yun as the racist cops. In the scene near the end where they are kicking the shit out of Benny, the cops momentarily shift to their real selves of Dukat and Wei Yun. Sure, this is a symptom of what Sisko/Benny is experiencing, the two realities bleeding into one another. We see it happen at other times in the episode, but this time specifically is meaningful for another reason. When the racist cops turn back into Dukat and Wei Yun for a moment, that's the episode telling us that these characters are the same. The white cops who use their authority to bully, brutalize, and murder people of color, and Dukat and Wei Yun differ only as far as their appearances and the regime they serve, whether it's for white supremacy or an interstellar fascist empire. An agent of oppression is an agent of oppression. Avery Brooks's performance as Benny is the heart of the episode, and that heart is exposed in his big breakdown scene at the magazine office when he learns that his story won't be printed after all, and also that he's been fired. I love this scene because it lives on a knife's edge between shatteringly real and theatrically over the top. Brooks absolutely goes for it, playing Benny's breakdown as an uninhibited pouring out of all the grief and humiliation and rage he's been holding inside this entire time. He's tried to be calm. He's tried to compromise, he's swallowed his pride, and tried to follow the condescending advice of those two cops and stay out of trouble, and look where it's gotten him. To say the least, it's a big performance, and because of that, it's easy to make fun of, but for me, that only comes after it's over. Avery Brooks is undeniably a ham, but he is just as undeniably a powerful and compelling actor. And though his performance of Benny's breakdown is unrestrained, it's also in earnest. And when I'm watching it, I'm not thinking about mocking it. I'm thinking about how much my heart breaks for Benny. And for Jimmy, too, who was murdered by the police for allegedly trying to steal a car, just in case we forgot and thought that police brutality was a recent phenomenon. Far Beyond the Stars was written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler from a story by Mark Scott Zicree and was directed by Avery Brooks. Behr was the series showrunner from season 3 on and wrote or co-wrote many of the best-known episodes. Beimler was a prolific writer on both TNG and DS9 and worked on episodes such as Yesterday's Enterprise, The Sword of Kahless, Trials and Tribulations, and many others. Zicree is a prolific TV writer who contributed episodes to shows such as Babylon 5, Forever Knight, and Sliders, as well as writing for animated series like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, The Real Ghostbusters, and Super Friends, but his Star Trek work is pretty limited. Other than this episode, he wrote the story for the 4th season TNG episode First Contact, and that's it. Hey, he picked his spots, and he made them count. Good for him. One quick note on the writing. Though I don't think it's ever been confirmed by anyone involved in making the episode, the story of Far Beyond the Stars seems to be inspired by a real-life incident that occurred involving the publication of a story by EC Comics. The story is called Judgment Day and depicts a human astronaut who determines that an alien society of robots is unfit to join the Galactic Republic because the robots practice discrimination based on their color. In the final panel of the story, the astronaut removes his helmet and reveals for the first time that he is a black man. The story was originally published in 1953, the year in which Far Beyond the Stars takes place. But when EC Comics publisher William Gaines wanted to reprint the story a few years later, after the establishment of the Comics Code Authority, he ran into an objection from Charles Murphy, the administrator of the Comics Code. Gaines refused to back down, and eventually Murphy relented and the story was reprinted, but that issue turned out to be the last comic book ever published by EC Comics, and Gaines soon shifted his focus to his more successful publication, Mad Magazine. Difficulties in the 1950s getting a sci-fi story published starring a black protagonist? Sounds familiar. As a director, Brooks succeeds by letting the actors do the work, primarily himself, but the rest of the cast holds up their end as well. He does a good job handling the moments where Sisko's reality blips into Benny's, keeping things simple and not allowing the sudden returns to the world of Deep Space Nine to drag us out of Benny's world, which is where this story really lives. Far Beyond the Stars succeeds because it has something to say, and it says it. It says it by putting our series hero, Captain Sisko, into the shoes of another, more down-to-earth hero, Benny Russell, a man who just wants to tell stories about people like him and have his work be given a chance to find an audience. It's a human story, and it's a tragic story, and an angry story. Benny is forced to live in a world where his opportunities are limited, and he is constantly under the threat of violence simply because of the color of his skin. Nobody should have to live in a world like that, whether that world exists in Star Trek or in reality. Benjamin Sisko may live out there far beyond the stars, but Benny Russell lives right here. We owe him a better world, just the same as we owe it to ourselves and to each other. Those are my thoughts on Far Beyond the Stars. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this batch of reviews of Star Trek's wokest episodes continues. Next time, we'll move on to Star Trek Voyager and take a look at an episode from that show's 4th season, an episode titled Nemesis. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.